Hello, this is Bryan Rosner with Biomed Publishing Group. And sorry I haven't done a video post in a while. We've been getting hammered by snow here. Actually, we got about 5 feet over the last week and a half or so. It's actually the biggest winter we've had since about 1993. And I was going to try to film this post outside in front of my house, but it was just too much of a hassle with the snow and the cold and the ice and that type of thing. Today I want to talk to you about the Marshall Protocol. I've had some requests to have a video post about some more specifics about the Marshall Protocol. Some of the other posts I've done in the last few weeks have just sort of focused on more Marshall Protocol theory. And, you know, that's helpful and all, and you need to know the theory, but there is some need for practical information as well. The Marshall Protocol website is pretty obscure. They've got tons of information on there and a lot of theory, a lot of forums, you know, a lot of posts, but it's hard to drill down and actually find specifics like how do I do this protocol? How do I start? You know, what do I do? So if you look above, a few inches above this video, you'll see some links, and I've posted some links to the nuts and bolts of the Marshall Protocol instructions. There's 3 phases of the Marshall Protocol, phase 1, 2, and 3. And they make the instructions for phase 1 public, and phase 2 and phase 3 you have to request the Marshall Protocol website administrators send that to you. And the reason they keep those private is because they don't want you getting ahead of yourself, because the Marshall Protocol can be a fairly intense treatment and they don't want people, you know, hurting themselves with going too fast. And I can really respect that. I mean, it makes some sense to do it that way. So I'm not a physician, and I'm also not an approved Marshall Protocol moderator or instructor or anything like that, so I won't really be able to tell you how you should use the Marshall Protocol. That's what those links above that I was just talking about are for, but I can tell you a little bit about my experience with it, and that'll give you some insight into how the Marshall Protocol might be used. Now, please keep in mind that my experience with the Marshall Protocol is not necessarily normative. I did make some modifications to the protocol, which Trevor Marshall may or may not agree with. He probably wouldn't agree with them. So keep in mind as you're listening to this that this isn't considered instructions. This is just what I did in my experience. Now, like I said, I won't really be talking about the theory of the Marshall Protocol. There's already a lot of information about that, including my videos in the Marshall Protocol website. So I won't be talking about why I necessarily did what I did. I'll just tell you what I did. Benicar is one of the first things you start when you take the protocol. It's a prescription blood pressure drug, actually, that has been found to have an off-label purpose of lowering vitamin D and inflammation in the body. Now, the first time that I took Benicar, it gave me such a strong reaction. It was the strongest reaction I've ever had from almost any Lyme disease treatment. Maybe the only one that would have been more extreme was when I first used the Doug machine up in Seattle when I was visiting Doug McLean. I was so sure that the Benicar reaction that I had was a side effect that I was freaked out. I didn't take it again for about 6 weeks, and it just, you know, it freaked me out. I thought there's no way this could be a Herxheimer reaction. I did end up kind of going back and trying to take it again, and the same thing happened. It gave me this horrible reaction. To make a long story short, I kept going back over about 6 months and trying to get on the protocol again, and it got to the point where I could take a few doses or maybe even a few days and then finally even a few weeks, but I always had to stop because it was just so intense and the reactions were so extreme. But I did come to learn that those reactions were in fact beneficial Herxheimer reactions and adjustment reactions as my body began to actually heal and remove the bacteria. And eventually, after about 6 months, I was able to stay on the Benicar full time, and I was feeling incredibly better, much better. This is one of the things that led me to the, you know, theory that I had already known about, that these types of reactions, whether they be with Rife machines or the Marshall Protocol or that type of thing, they can really scare people away, but in general, they are indeed Herxheimer reactions and not side effects. So that can be sort of confusing. Now, I'm already getting off my purpose here, which was to talk to you about how I use the Marshall Protocol and not go into theory. You'll have to forgive me. I am sort of a theory-minded person, which is why I do the work that I do. Anyway, after I was able to stay on Benicar continuously, the next phase of the Marshall Protocol is to take very low doses of antibiotics on kind of a strange schedule, which is like 10 or 20 milligrams of minocycline every other day. And you'd think, oh, how can that small amount of a drug do anything beneficial? Well, amazingly, once the Benicar is in your system and once the bacteria have been weakened, antibiotics have a much amplified effect. And I would notice that just 10 or 20 milligrams of minocycline would allow me to have Herxheimer reactions and improvement that was on par with 400 milligrams of minocycline previous to the Marshall Protocol. So that's a very amazing quality of the Marshall Protocol. The second phase of the Marshall Protocol happens after you have been able to take Benicar and the minocycline and not have any more extreme reactions. In other words, you've sort of adjusted to that part of the protocol. Now, I won't be talking about exactly what happens on Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the Marshall Protocol out of respect for the Marshall Protocol administrators who would prefer that that information stay private until you've had a email little conversation with them and requested the other phases. But essentially, you basically add other antibiotics to the mix and you just get a little bit more aggressive. It's not anything mysterious or, something that you wouldn't guess. It's something that is pretty common sense as far as their Phase 2 and Phase 3 go. But again, I'll save that for them to distribute that information according to the guidelines that they feel most comfortable with. Now, I did get to a point where I started to use the Marshall Protocol a little bit differently than what Trevor Marshall probably would have done, and this is just my experience. I'm not asking anybody to accept this as a normative thing. Sorry, I'm going to turn my cell phone off here. And basically the way that I modified the protocol is I found that the Benicar was just too hard on my body after a while to keep taking, so I would stop taking the Benicar for a few months and then take it again and then stop taking it. And what I found that was fairly amazing was that in order to keep the vitamin D levels under control in my body, whether or not I was using Benicar, I had to really stay out of the sun. And that is the way it is even to this day with my health now. I notice I can be in the sun a lot more, but I still do notice that I start to have symptoms return a little bit if I get too much sun. And some of my personal experiences on the Marshall Protocol have really confirmed the truth that Trevor Marshall discovered, because he really did figure out how the sun interacts with the body. And anyway, as I was saying, to this day, the sun still does affect me. Some other modifications I made to the protocol were I stopped using the antibiotics after a while. I found that the antibiotics that were recommended in the Marshall Protocol also sort of tapered off in their effect, and so I didn't use those quite as much. So this is Bryan Rosner with Biomed Publishing Group. Sorry this post has been a little bit scattered. I have a lot going on right now, and I'm struggling to get these videos done. But I did want to commit to doing them and at least give you a little bit more background information on the Marshall Protocol. If you didn't really get much benefit from my ramblings today, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I think the most beneficial thing for you if you're considering the Marshall Protocol would be to explore the links that I've posted above. These links take you into the Marshall Protocol website and sort of separate the wheat from the chaff and show you where the instructions are to actually start the protocol. This might be something that you would share with your doctor, in case your doctor didn't want to have to navigate the Marshall Protocol him or herself and wanted to get a little bit more specifics about it. So I hope you found this video to be informative. A little disclaimer, I am a journalist, not a medical professional, so this post is intended for informational purposes only, not medical advice. And if you happen to want to learn more about the research and the books that I have produced in the Lyme disease community, you can do so at lymebook.com. That's LYMEBOOK.com. Signing off here from 5 feet of snow. I'm going to go try to clean out the 3-inch block of ice that's lining my garage floor. Not too much fun. Hopefully I'll be able to produce a video again soon. All right.